Last week we left off in the middle of the Hakdama to HaMitzvos. The Yadua Shamilchama, the Kibush Haratzos. We don't understand what the doubling is, and whether it's Kibush Oretz or Kibush Haratzos or Ayorois. Whether we're talking B'Chera. Even according to the Rambam, I think I might have pointed out last week, I'm not sure. Even according to the Rambam, it's Kibush Oretz. Kibush Oretz is not a Milchemes Mitzvah, because the Milchemes Mitzvah is only Zayin Amamin and Amalek. And that's in Pirush Mishnayos. In Mishnah Torah, he adds a defensive war, which we don't know. We don't see that here necessarily in mitzvahs, but that's really relevant. So Kibush Haratzos is to conquer lands is l'chor by definition Milchemes Rishus. But in general, I think we also pointed out last week that the Rambam has that both the mitzvah of Milchemes mitzvah and Milchemes Rishus is not noig bizman hazeh. As he says later, Mafush, both Milchemes mitzvah and Milchemes Rishus. He says, Milchemes mitzvah and Milchemes Rishus. So here, when he means Milchama, it means both. But he's talking about both anyway now. So that which I assume Melech is needed for both, whereas Atzas, and that's what we'll see, Atzas Sanhedri Gedolah is certainly needed only for Milchemes Rishus. So let's go slowly. The word Atzas is very odd, because in the Mishnah, Atzas, you get the impression it's advice. And Pasha says Sanhedrin, at least in the Mishnah, Sanhedrin is not acting in terms of advice. Sanhedrin is giving rishus, as the Mishnah says in Sanhedrin Perek Aleph Mishnah Hey, and the Ram Pirsha Mishnah, and in Mishnah Torah. It's all talking rishus Sanhedrin and Askoma. Pirush Mishnayos Perek Aleph Mishnah Hey, Lefi Shalo Hoyoytze L'Milchemes Rishus El Ach Mekabel Haskomos Sanhedrin Gedolah. It's they should acquiesce, not advise them, but acquiesce. The advice is Nistav, not Likuva. But if it's Rishus, then we understand it's Likuva and Milchemes Rishus, where you require Rishus and Hedron. So Milchemes Rishus, in terms of Sanhedrin, is not noig bizman hazeh, because there's no Sanhedrin, and Sanhedrin is only b'fnei abayis, and therefore Milchama is only b'fnei abayis, and that which there's no Sanhedrin el b'fnei abayis is probably from the Rambam's Lashon before, V'shom ne'emar, then the Mechilta Gam Kain, Minayin Shetehei Sanhedrin Smucha L'Mizbeach, Talmud Loima, Me'im Mizvechei Tikchen Olomus. Shalosh Minayin Shetehei Sanhedrin Smucha L'Mizbeach is mashma that Smucha L'Mizbeach Sanhedrin is not talking about Mrs. Bezdin, at least Chayra. So if there's no Mizbeach, there's no Sanhedrin. And that the Rambam says there's no Sanhedrin Bisman Hazeh. Because the Rambam before has a Drosh Minayin She'ein Me'misel B'fnei Abayis, that's a din in Mrs. Bezdin. But the Drosh afterwards is the Drosh there's no Sanhedrin. If you look at the Ramban in Hasogis, in Mitzvah Kufnun Gimel, quotes this whole part of the Akdama and says, you see, according to the Rambam, that there's no Sanhedrin, that these are Tanoim Sanhedrin. Therefore, yes, how could there be Sanhedrin for Kiddush HaChodesh in Bayesheni? And afterwards, the Talmei Abayi and Robo. If there's no Sanhedrin, there's no Kiddush HaChodesh. That's the Ramban also learns like this in the Rambam, that the Mizbeach is a Tanaim L'Shem Sanhedrin. In Mitzvah Seikuf Nun Gimel. And the Rambam himself clearly says later, Kol mitzvah say loisa say shetiye, and I'm skipping the bisanhedrin mitzvah zeis ein onu chayovim boel v'nei abayis. So he says anything has to do with sanhedrin can't be. It has to be dependent on bias because you need sanhedrin song mizbeach. So therefore, Milchemes Rishus, which depends on Sanhedrin, can't be Bisman Hazeh. As another reason, well, because, but if it requires, since it requires Melech, anyway, there's no Melech Bisman Hazeh, as he said before. And he continues, he says, just one second. So let's just talk about this assumption, and that there's no Sanhedrin Bisman Hazeh, because there's no Mizbeach. The problem is that you have this Gemara that is Sanhedrin, even there's no base of Kayim. And that's the Gemara Rosh Hashanah. Lamed Aleph Lamed Aleph. Omer Yehuda, Baridi, Omer Yechanon. Ese Masos, Nosa Shechina. Okay, v'chule. That's just a maima, separate maima, but it says, Ukenegdon Golsa Sanhedrin, Migmora, Milishkas, Hagozes Lechanus, Umechanus Liyushalayim, Yushalayim Liyavne, and then Umiyavne Leusha. And it's foolish, explicit, that there was Sanhedrin, including Yavne. Even after Churban, so the Sanhedrin after Churban Abayis. And the whole Rambam over here, the source is that Sanhedrin only exists in as much as there's a Mizbeach. So the Rambam L'cheira is saying that the Sanhedrin, which is necessary for Shus Milchama, needs Lifnei HaMizbeach. But L'cheira, you see from the Gemara in the Rosh Hashanah from Eser Golios that there's a Shem Sanhedrin, even though there's no Mizbeach. So the question is how the two trains meet. L'cheira, that's what's happening. And it's clear that this is true because in Sifri you find there's Gezeres HaKosus to tell you that when there's a riv and a machlekes about the Meseira, the Sifri is in Shoftim, Piska, Kuf Nun Dalet, that you go up to and you l'rabois bezin shebeyavne, that you also have to come levare and accept their psak of what the Messiah is or what how we should act, and especially according to the Rambam that this Kiddush HaChodesh even at Timei Abayin Gogo, as the Ram says in Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, even though there was no Mizbeach. So the truth is the Sifri does support this because it has separatist as a kosu that there is such a thing as Bezin Shabiyavn and has dinim. The only question is how you go about deciding what Shem Sanhedrin is maintained and what not becomes very odd. You don't know how to do it, but it's very clear that at least in terms of Biro, Meseiro, Psak Din, there is a Sanhedrin because the Rabbi is Bezin Shebeyavne. The Ramban disagrees with the Rambam as far as Kiddush HaChodesh Apiaria, and he says that Kiddush HaChodesh Apiaria doesn't require Sanhedrin, therefore you can continue doing it today. So then the Ramban seems to say that after Churban Abayis, there's no Sanhedrin whatsoever. What's going to happen with the Sifri? I'm not getting involved in that, but that's those are the issues. On one hand, the Ram seems to say, and which the Ramban agrees with, if there's no Mizbeach, there's no Sanhedrin. And on the other hand, you have the Sifrizi, and that the Rambam has a certain halachas. There is still Sanhedrin. That's okay. Where the Ramban stands in terms of this, we have to know. Secondly, the Ram's opinion is that there'll be a chiddush of Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin will be reinstituted before Binyan Abayis. The Ram Pirush Mishnayis in Sanhedrin Perek Aleph Mishnah Gimel, Vani Sovu Se HaSanhedrin Toshuv Lifnei Hizgalus HaMashiach V'zeh Yiyeh Misimonov Omar V'ashivo Shriftayich Kavarishoino V'yoatzaich Kivatachilo Me'acha Kein Yikol Lecho Ir HaTzedek V'zeh Yiyeh B'li Sofek Kasher Yachshir Hashem Libois Kol B'nei Odom V'yirbu B'maaseh HaTov U'segadel Tchukosom L'Hashem U'L'Seirosoi V'Yisrabe Yoshrom Lifnei Bo HaMoshiach Moshi's-boy B'Sukei HaMikvah. So the Ram is very clear. So therefore, right? So since the Mashiach is only going to come at the Sanhedrin, one second. The Mashiach is going to become after there's already Sanhedrin. So you see, the question is, how can this be? Because what about Binyan Abayis? So maybe that Sanhedrin, which is going to become prior to the Mashiach, prior to Binyan Abayis, is equivalent to Sanhedrin B'Yavne, which wasn't required by. It's all not difficult. See, once you have these Gzeres Kosten Sifri, there's a Chal Hashem Sanhedrin outside of after Churban, so it could be the Sanhedrin that will be Nizgale, or we instituted before the Mashiach, before being Abayis, will also have the status of Sanhedrin B'Yavne. But however, it would come out that this Sanhedrin can't give rishus for Milchama. Okay. Next. Then the Ram says, he said, "V'yadu Hashem Milchama v'kibush ha'rotzos lo yiyu ela b'melech u'batzas Sanhedrin gedela v'koyin gadol." See, here comes Kohen Gadol. Let's know what this is. The Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol is leader from Milchama. Kimoi she'oma lifnei Elazar hakohen yamod. So let's understand with this lifnei Elazar hakohen yamod. So, l'chveira, this whole thing is a discussion that you need v'tumim. That you need shelas v'tumim ketanai l'milchama. And let's assume that it's Milchemes Rishus. Well, it's not clear. We don't know. Because we only know about Rishus Sanhedrin that it's Milchemes Rishus. But what about Milchemes Mitzvah? We don't know one way or the other at the moment. In terms of Betumim. However, in terms of Sanhedrin, that's only necessary for Milchemes Rishus. And this idea that you require Betumim for Milchama is this pasuk: Lifnei Elazar hakohen ya'amod v'sho'al loi b'mishpat ha'urim Lifnei Hashem al piv yetzu b'pi yavo hu v'chol b'nei Yisrael itoi v'chol ha'eda. And l'cheira, this is yetzu. Yetzu is yetzu Milchama. The interesting thing is, and this is the Ram over here, in Mishnah Torah, there's no mention about v'tumim in terms of Milchama. And doesn't discuss it at all. So it seems to be that Mishnah Torah and Minyan HaMitzvos are diametrically, or the Akdama to Minyan HaMitzvos dialectically opposed, where they require v'tumim from Milchama. So maybe the Ram Mishnah Torah holds that shelis v'tumim is not a t'nai in Milchemes Rishus or Milchama, whatever, like he learns over here, but it's a heter to be shoyl v'tumim. And it's a heter l'kol tzochet tzivo, and lav dafka Milchama. The shoyl is a melech, or bezdin, or the Mishat Tzibah boy. And the Makor of the Heter She'ela is from this Pasha, which the Ram quotes over here as a Tanai Mechomo, the Ram quotes the Psukim Mimini Yeshua. And it's not in the Pasha Mechomo. So the Ram learns it's not in the Pasha Mechomo, but it's the Pasha Mimini Yeshua. It's not a Tanai Mechomo, but a Het Sheila. And that's the Lashon Ram Mishnah Torah, because the Ram Mishnah Torah brings the posik with Nei Alos Aklein Yamud V'Shoal as far as the Het Sheila. The Ram in Hilchos Klei Mikdash v'Oivnim Boy Per Gur Aloch Yud Beis V'Ein Nisholin Bohen LeHedit El Ol Melech Ol Bezdin Ol Mishat Soch Atzibo Boy Shenema Livnei Alos Aklein Yamud Who זה המלך. וכל בני ישראל, זה הוא משיח משור מלחמו. או מי שצורך הציבור בשאלוסי. וכל העדו, אלו בזן הגודל. So the question is very odd. And Mishnah Torah still agrees with Shus, as far as with Sanhedrin, it's a Tanai Makiv, and Uvetumim is only a Heta, and that's a Mishnah Torah. Here in the Akdama, it's all the same, both Sanhedrin and Uvetumim are Tanai in the Heta Muhammad. And the emes is mistaber that it's cholok rishus and hedrin to shelas uvetumim, because it's a double portion. You don't need a heter to ask Sanhedrin what their advice is. So the interaction with Sanhedrin is not an issue with advice. That's not what we're talking about. But and that's the pasuk Zu Sanhedrin. But the heter Sanhedrin is not is no heter to ask, but you need Rishus Sanhedrin. But Shilas Umetumim, they're dinim miyuchodim, who is allowed to ask. And what in you allowed to ask, and that's what the Xeris Kosovo is telling you. That's what he learns in Mishnah Torah, that Umatum is a heter, and Rishus Sanhedrin is Taka and Ikuv. So, L'chpeira, just from a historical point of view, there's enough gemina between, let's say, the Vitum, the Mishnah Torah, and here Minyan HaMitzvos, the following nafkamina. What happened in Milchemes Shaul with the Plishtim? Okay, Milchemes Shaul with the Plishtim. So it goes like this. Was there heter? Wasn't there heter? Because Shaul did not get Rishus from the Umetumim. So if he didn't get Rishus from the Umetumim, L'cheira, according to his words here in Akdama to Minyan HaMitzvos, it should have been also. And however, according to his approach in Mishnah Torah, it's only a heter to ask. So it just didn't. So he didn't have the. So he didn't ask, but he's still not to go to war. It's in Shmuel Aleph, Pei Chof Ches, Posik Hey Vov, Vayar Shaul es machne plishtim vayiro vayechrad libo me'od vayish'al Shaul b'Hashem v'lo anohu Hashem v'gam b'chaloimois gam b'chaloimois gam bi'urim gam b'neviim. Okay, and he went to war. So the question is, so what happens? Maybe there was no het to b'chlal, and that l'chayr should depend upon these two approaches. Now, so we know there's no Sanhedrin unless you have Mizbeach, right? And I guess there's no Melech because Melech's only going to come back. The Melech Mashiach is going to come back only after the reinstitution of the war. That the conclusion you find in Igeres Teman, Ois Gimel, he quotes the same psukim about the Chazoros Nevuah, and he says that the Chazoros Nevuah will be prior to Mashiach. Will be Echel Misimonov. So I assume that the working assumption is that Nevuah also come back with or somewhere around the Tkufa of Binyan Abayis. And everything depends on Abayis, but that's what's happening. The Melech and Sanhedrin depend upon the Tkufa, and Milchama, all of it depend upon the Tkufa of Binyan Abayis or Chazoros Nevuah. That's what I'm okay. The question is, how do we know anything about Urim v'Tumim, when they're going to come back and when not? So this is the most simple question and a simple answer, because there is a pasuk in Ezra, Peri Beis, pasuk Samach Gimel. It says, Ad amoid koyin lu'urim u'esumim. And Rashi there, Ad amoid koyin says, Ki odom ho'ime lechaveiroi, Ad yemois haMoshiach. So it means that the Urim v'Tumim only come back in Moshe Mashiach and all puts together. So the Ram here can add, once he learns that Muhammad requires Rishus of Urim v'Tumim, so it's another reason why you can't have Muhammad today. Okay. So now that's very simple. That Urim v'Tumim is depends upon Mashiach. Okay, next comes the Ramban in his Asogas to the Mitzvah Saseh, V'alavim, the Ho'esin, V'alavim, Shesilik, that's his final summary of what he adds and subtracts in Minyan HaMitzvos from the Rambam. And he entertains, as a suffix, he entertains the possibility that Shailas HaMelech, B'Urim v'Tumim, is a separate mitzvah in Minyan Tayag. And however, he says, if you're ready to say that there's a mitzvah, the mitzvah is lav dafka mechemes rishus, but it's also mechemes mitzvah. He writes like this: V'yeshli inyan mitzvah mistapik olai, v'hu shiur li shemitzvah al hamelech o al hashofet umi she'om b'rshus lo yitzio letzavo hamitzvah b'mechemes rishus oy mitzvah liyoy shoyel bi'ur b'tumim v'alpiyem yisnaeg b'inyonom v'omo yis'ale v'vnei alo zakoyin yamoid v'shor loy b'mishbar uim lifnei Hashem alpiv yetzu v'alpiv yovo'u. Yitzav b'Yeshua shu Moshe Rishon asher hu pokid al hoedo sheyishal b'inyonom b'um v'tumim v'alpi mishpotom yotzion v'yovion v'chein b'chol asher yitem hamalachim l'doros. Brachas Sanhedrin, Shoy David HaMelech, Tzava L'chu, Pishtu Yedechem, Bigdud, Shesholin, Biyum V'tum. So it's a mitzvah. In Taryag, maybe. So, L'chei, according to Ramban, it's very clear that Shelis V'tumim is not just the heter, but it's a kiyum mitzvah. The Rambam certainly doesn't have such a mitzvah. And maybe the Rambam learns here that it's not a mitzvah at all. It's just a Tanai HaMa'akiv in Melchama. Or maybe the Rambam here learns that there is a mitzvah, but it's a hakdama to the mitzvah Melchama. So Memela, according to Shiur, it shouldn't be minyan mitzvahs. But you see, there's a very important diuk in the Ramban. You see, is the mitzvah just to ask? Or it's more than that, according to Ramban. Now, listen to the Lashon, and you'll see very carefully that it's more than that. Because he says, V'yesh li inyan mitzvah mistapik olai, v'hu she'yir li shemitzvah al hamelech or al hashofet, u'mi she'om b'rshus lo yitzion b'tzovo, tzvo b'melchama, which mechemes rishus or mitzvah, li'o shoyer b'um v'tumim. V'al pihem yisnaeg b'inyonom. Not only the mitzvah is not only to ask, but the mitzvah is to act according to what the Urim V'tumim says. V'al piyam yisnaeg b'inyonom. See, if she'ela is only a rishus, let's say it's the Melchama, L'chayre mechemes mitzvah, you don't need rishus because they have the mitzvah. But if the sheila is an eitzah to whether to go or what to do or how to act, and the mitzvah is according to what the Tirum says, so it applies to Muhammad's mitzvah also. So but according to the Rambam, the whole discussion is rishus to make a milchama. It's not there to be a list. They have to. There's a mitzvah misnaig according to Umm. So then maybe it's only mechemes mitzvah rishus because mechemes rishus requires the rishus of bezdin and the rishus of Umm. But according to the Ram Mishnah Torah, the whole thing is out because only a hete, as we discussed before. Okay, now let's try to wrap this up. Let's go. The last, this is the end of the tail end of the Akdama. To minyan mitzvahs ula pirsum hoinyonim hoelu kula eitzel roi v'anoshim. I assume he's talking about the loimdim. I don't know, or people who kol mitzvahs haseh or leis haseh shetia tluya b'karbonos oi ba'avodos. Oi, the Mrs. Bezdin, O B'Sanhedrin, O B'Novi Umelech, O Mechemes Mitzvah, O Mechemes Rishus. Lo Itztarech Shoima Bo, I won't be necessary to say, O Mitzvah Zois, Eino Chayov Me'elo B'Fnei Abayis. So, Mechemes Mitzvah, according to the Rambam in Minyan Mitzvahs, in Mitzvah is mitzvahs, the mitzvahs which are dependent upon Mechemes Mitzvah are Kuf Pei Zayin, Zayin Amamin, Kuf Pei Ches, Mechias Amolek, and Kuf Tzadi, the mitzvah Mechemes Rishus. And the mitzvahs which are the mitzvah Mechemes Rishus, the mitzvah, that's what I was talking about. And then the mitzvahs which are intertwined with the mitzvah, with Mechemes Mitzvah, Mechemes Rishus, Meshichas Kohen Mashuach Mechomo, Asei Kuf Sadi Aleph, Haskonas Yad B'Machne Mechomo, Kuf Sadi Beis, Haskonas Yosei B'Machne Mechomo, Kuf Sadi Gimel, Kriya Shalom Li'amon U'Moyav, Loisese Kuf Nun, Loisese Nun Vov, and the lav of Aschosas Iloni Macho, Loisese Nun Zayin, and the lav Lifached, to be afraid of Oivim B'Shas Mechomo, Loisese Kuf Nun Ches. And these all are not noig b'zman hazeh. So once the Ram here says, "Hey, oi b'mechemes mitzvah, o b'mechemes rishus," it means, according to the Ram, there's no mechomo at all. I'm not, just listen carefully. The Ram says that b'zman hazeh, there's no mechemes mitzvah and no mechemes rishus. That's what he says. So the assumption is that in Mochemes Mitzvah, you certainly at least need Melech, and there's no Melech. So let's take, for example, let's do a historical perspective before we'll see what we'll do with today. But the mitzvah, the Milchemes HaChashmonoim, there was no Melech. The Malchus, whatever it meant, or whether it was or wasn't, was only reinstituted as an afterthought of the Milchama. But b'shas Milchama, there was no Melech. So the mitzvah, Milchemes Rishus, was non-extant. It didn't exist. And see, I'm not getting involved. And maybe, it wasn't really Malchus. What were the Malchus Hashmonoim? Maybe it's only Malchus without Melech. The reason why I'm saying such a thing, and let me just make a Pashta Cheshbon. You can decide yourself, okay? The Pashta Cheshbon is like this. See. Yeah. Yeah. So the Ram, when he's talking about there's not going to be Melech, okay, until Binyan Abayis, so until Chazos and Levur, he says, V'oma Chazos HaMalchus V'Ashiltoin in Malchus and Melucha V'yoim Hahu Okim Esukas Dover and Nefeles V'Godalti Es Pirtzeim V'Aloisiv Okim V'Halisoisov Okim Ubenasiya Kimei Olam. Okay, now let's make the cheshbon, and correct me maybe if I'm wrong. This pasuk is a pasuk in Amos. Okay, Amos. Okay, Amos was was before Bayis Sheni, but let's say even the worst, which is not the total chill. He was the beginning of Bayis Sheni because there was the end of the Vur, Chagis Chayim Alochi, with the end of the Vur, right? So he said in the Vur that the Chazos Malchus will only come, Sukas Dober Nofeles will only come with the Mashiach, which he's talking about, will only come after Chazos and the Vur, which is the way the thing works here, correct? So the Chashmonoim was certainly after Amos. So maybe it means there was only Malchus, but not, it was only a Memshala, but not a Meluch. But no Melech. Whatever it is, but the Ram says that the Psukim, we learn from the Psukim, there's no Melech. Any mitzvahs which depend upon Melech did not exist. So you have to think about all this when you think about the period. And I'm just want to be lave, but you look at the Rambam, and it says that they were machzir. 1 second, see? Ve'midu melech min hakohanim v'chozer malchus Yisrael. So you have to understand what that means exactly. See, I would have said that's the Rambam Perek Gimel of Hilchos Chanukah, Halacha Aleph. So I would have said that the pasuk in Amos is talking about Malchus Beis David, but the Malchus Kohanim you could have had, and that's the pasuk. Sukas David and the fellas. It's talking about the Messianic times and Malchus Beis David. However, if you learn like that, the Ram has no argument that there's not going to be Melech until the Messianic times. Maybe there will be a Melech, but it won't be Malchus Beis David. It becomes very odd, you know. If there could have been a time of a Chashmonoim and it was after the divorce almost, so who says there are no mitzvahs then? To depend upon Melech. So I'm very confused over here, okay? So that is about the Milchemes Chashmonoim. Now, the question is, what about wars today? And you see, in Minyan HaMitzvos, the idea that there might be a Milchemes mitzvah when it comes to a defensive war doesn't exist. The Ram Pirush Shnais in Sanhedrin also says the only Milchemes mitzvah is Milchemes Zayin Am, Milchemes Amalek. But the Ram Mishnah Torah in Hilchos Melachim clearly says that defensive war is also a mitzvah. The Ram Pirush Shnais says Milchemes mitzvah he Milchemes in Perek Aleph Mishnah Hey in Sanhedrin Amalek v'Shiva Amamin Bilvad. Milchemes Amalek v'Shiva Amamin Bilvad. But Mishnah Torah Perek Aleph Halacha Aleph Ezer Milchemes mitzvah Zo v'Chulei, that's Amalek and Zayin Amamin. And then he adds V'Ezras Yisrael mi'atzar shebo aleim. So maybe, you know, you could certainly make a you could say that maybe the Ram Mishnah Torah has a Milchemes mitzvah b'zman hazeh, and not Zayin Amamin, and not not saying on Amalek, but you know, you see, you could let's say it like this. Let's not even talk about Zman there. Maybe according to the Ram Mishnah Torah, once you're ready to accept, there's an idea of a defensive war. Maybe that's what's going on with the Chashmonoim. And maybe it was as Yisrael mi'atzar shebo aleim. And maybe such a Muhammad doesn't require melech. And that you have to know. Okay, now, Kol mitzvah, the Ram says, shetia tluya v'chulei benovi or melech lo yitztach shoyva bo u'mitzvah zeis ein onu chayovim bo el b'fnei habayis. I don't know if it means that melech depends upon binyan habayis. Maybe all it means is that melech depends upon Kufas Beis Hamikdash, because Chazos and Nevuah and everything will be at the Kufas Beis Hamikdash. Whether they'll build the Melech will come first, and then the Nevuah and Melech and Binyan Habayis be afterwards. It could have been. The Rambam, I don't think, is talking about the Dakas that has to be at the same time, because the Rambam in Mishnah Torah clearly says in Perek Aleph, in Perek Yud Aleph of Hilchos Malachim u'Mulchamos, v'im yamud melech mibeis David hoige b'seira v'yisik b'mitzvos keDavid aviv kefi Torah shebiksav v'shebal peh v'Yakov kol Yisrael leilech bo u'lechazik bitka v'lucha v'yucha milchames Hashem harizeh b'cheska shu Mashiach v'im osa v'tzliach v'nitzach kol umois shesvivov ubona mikdosh b'mekoymoi. So it's afterwards. V'kibetz nitche Yisrael harizeh Mashiach vada. Gmon sukkah and beis and beis. You might look at that, whether the Mashiach might logically, it preceded a little bit. Might be Boine Beis Hamikdash and Mamid Borabo and Parshas Nosai, Parsha Yud Gimel, Siman Beis, also like this. The Maisa, it's two opinions in Yerushalmi, whether Mashiach is called the Binyan Habayis or not. I'm not getting involved in this Yerushalmi. You look it up yourself in Maisa Sheni, Perek Hey, Halacha Beis, Amr Acha, so Yisamer Shebeis Hamidrash Osir Libonos Koidel L'Malchus Beis David V'chule. And there's another opinion that that's what the Pnei Moshe says. That's the Gemara, but the Mishnah Rabbi Yossi is Mashiach is Bo Koidel Binyan Habayis, which is the way the Rambam paskins. Okay, Beseder. So that's what we have here. I'm just very confused. Is that look like after Churban Beis Hamikdash, the only Malchus can come back is Malchus Beis David, and why did the Chashmonai could have had him? I'm not sure how this works, because the Nevuah of Amos was before the second bias, and somehow we accepted the Malachim or in Bayis Sheni, but Ram quotes this person is not going to be a Melech. Okay, we say that until Limos Mashiach and Binyan Habayis and Hachzos and Nevuah. We say that. Okay. He says, Acha shezeh Nevuah mimash zechanu umash yefshi yasavre bo yoore olo bez Hashem bez Zakel v'ato aschil lisko mitzvah bez shakai. Okay, we say that. Now, this will just get started here. We'll pick this up next week in Hashem. המצווה חמישis היא שציוונו לעובדו. So mitzvah is avodas Hashem. וכבר נכפה ציווי זה פעמים, ואומרוי, ועבדתם את השם אלוקיכם, ואומר, ועושה עבודו, ואומר, ולעובדו. So, word pomim is a very strange word, and even Eov, his Targum says, "Ufanichbal tzivui zeh pomim rabois." And we'll see about this more in Mitzvah Hashem. So there's a tzivui of Artem es Hashem Elokeichem, and a tzivui of V'oisei Sa'avoidu, and we'll see about V'oisei Sa'avoid, which the Ram does quote later in the Mishnah Rabbi Eliezer. V'omar uliovdoi. Okay, so you have many tzivuyim. We'll have to understand the Mitzvah Hashem. We'll have to talk about what they are, and then the Ram makes a big statement, a very important statement. Afal pi sheheim shezeh hatzivui hu gam kein me'atzivuyim hakolim k'mo shebi'an b'sherish uvi. We have to understand why he assumes this is a mitzvah which is koil k'orto kula. Hine yesh bo yichud. There's something peculiar about it. Shehu tzivui b'tfilah, and because of that, it's a mitzvah in Mina mitzvahs. Lashon sifri uli avdoi zo tfilah. So you have to understand, uli avdoi can an infinitive be a tzivui, and we'll see about that also, Mitzvah Hashem. So Mitzvah Hashem, we'll pick this up next week. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Shiur next week will be Wednesday. Believe neder. Okay, that's